Hey guys, Raisins here back with another video. And this time I wanted to make a really short video, but I get a question a lot on stream and on Discord that I wanted to answer so I could refer people to this video. And that is, what support do I play? Or do I play this champ? Or is this champ good to learn support? So I'm going to make a short video talking about the supports I recommend and why I recommend them and what you should try to learn on those champs and what those champs specifically teach you about the role. So let's get into it. The reason I'm making this video is self-explanatory, but I split it into three categories because there's a lot of different types of players. You know, some players like playing tanks, some players like playing enchanters or mages. In this video, I split it into three categories: enchanters, tanks, mages, and I'll just tell you which champions I would personally start if I could start the game again. I would start learning on. In the tank category, what I would recommend starting with if you want to play engagey, tanky champs, there's two champions. One is Leona, and the other is Nautilus. Now, Leona, I would recommend because she has an incredibly simple kit, but is quite high skill cap. She teaches you a mix of being able to punish in certain lanes while also forcing you to roam to try and win the game. And tanks in general, every single tank that you could play will teach you about engaging, like when your team can follow up. If you engage and your team can't follow up, it'll be it'll be pretty obvious, and your team will most likely lose the fight, and it's your fault. So that'll teach you very quickly about like, oh, right, okay, I probably should all in when my whole team is in base. That's an important skill to learn as a tank. You also just have to be aware of your team's cooldowns. That's like a really important thing as an engaging support. Know exactly what cooldowns your team has and whether or not you can work around them so that they can actually deal damage. If your Vayne does not have flash and you flash into enemy backline, can anyone actually follow up? You know, that's the kind of stuff you have to ask yourself on Leona. And then the second champ is Nautilus. And I chose Leona and Nautilus. They're pretty much the same, so I'll just stick them together. They have very good laning phases, and a lot of, especially in lower level, you won't get punished as hard for picking these champs, so you can kind of learn how to punish in lane. They do have some bad matchups. There are bad matchups. For example, Leona sucks into Janna. Not very good into good Thresh players because she'll get denied early. But those matchups aren't like, oh my gosh, you can't play the game. It's more like you have to play safe, and then you'll start roaming to win the game. So if you want to play tanky champs, I would recommend Leona. I would recommend Nautilus. Focus on engaging when your team can follow up. Focus on roaming early. You're really, really strong if you can roam. Use Hex Flash on those champions. It's pretty much mandatory, and it'll allow you to gank mid lane from weird angles or, you know, use alcoves. And yeah, I mean, those are the two champs I would recommend starting to play if you want to play tanks. Then we move on to my favorite category of supports, enchanters. So if you want to play enchanters, there's one thing I always say before I mention what we should play in the enchanter role, which is don't play enchanters by sitting at your tower. A lot of players think, oh, they're enchanters. They just scale and they hit 2 items and they press E on their AD carry. Sure, you can do that, but then you'll be like 20% as useful as an actual dedicated good enchanter player. What you should be trying to do is trade in between the enemy's cooldowns. If it's an all-in lane, for example, you're playing an enchanter into someone who wants to all-in you. You need to you shouldn't just sit under your tower. You should try to bait out their cooldowns so that they throw them in a bad way, and then you can step up and you have the range advantage usually. Most enchanters usually have the range advantage. But anyway, that being said, enchanters, I would recommend to start learning support, or just to, you know, if you want to stick to a few champs and you really like enchanters, I would recommend Lulu, Karma, and Soraka. Now, Lulu Karma I threw on there. I pretty much would always throw on there. Soraka is a bit unique, but I'll talk about why I would recommend them. So Lulu, I think Lulu is probably one of the most broken supports below Platinum, simply because games go on longer. You can do whatever you want with your lead if you have a good teammate to play around. And frankly, most of the time you will always have at least one half decent teammate to play around. You can stick to them like glue. But then Lulu also teaches you about laning phase. And she has got some matchups where you won't really be able to bully, but then a lot of matchups where you can bully. And she has a range advantage in a lot of matchups, which means even in situations where you technically shouldn't be able to bully, if you're in like, you know, platinum, silver, gold, whatever, you can still punish because people make a lot of mistakes at that elo. And if you watch Smurfs play with Lulu, who are really good at Lulu, you'll realize why this champ is always picked as a kind of boosting tool, right? It's like a guaranteed win in low elo if you know how to play this champ. So yeah, it teaches you a lot about laning phase, about how to bully with your range advantage. But then when you get into the later stages of the game, it does exactly what enchanters do. You know, it like supercharges someone to become an unkillable demon king. And if that's your playstyle, if you like doing that, then this champion is just broken as all hell. So I would very much recommend playing Lulu. The second champ I would recommend is Karma. Now, Karma is kind of like a less hard scaling Lulu, but still incredibly strong. She's like a stronger laning phase version of Lulu in some ways. She has less peel and she has less CC, and less ways of directly stopping like strong enemy abilities. Like Lulu W and Lulu R teach you a lot about choosing the right opportunities to prevent the enemies getting cooldowns off. Karma has less of that, but what she has more of is laning phase. So Karma teaches you a lot about laning phase. She teaches you a lot about pushing your advantage without destroying the minion waves, basically. So you want to be trading on Karma aggressively, but you don't want to be screwing the minion waves up. So that's a really important skill to learn on Karma. But then what she also allows you to do is basically 1 versus 2 the lane. Lulu can sort of do this in some ways with her range, but Karma is very, very strong at 1v2ing lane, especially in lower elo, because you have crazy high damage, crazy high range, and you can abuse this to a ridiculous level. So yeah, if you want to play Karma and you want more aggressive playstyles in lane, then you can take over an entire laning phase yourself. So I'd recommend Karma if you want to learn like the enchanter, more aggressive enchanter playstyle. And then lastly, I put Soraka here, and there was kind of only one reason, and I don't know if this is actually enough to put her on the list, but a lot of people like Soraka, and a lot of supports like Soraka. So I thought I'd throw her on here, but there's one thing I would focus on when you're playing Soraka, and that is cooldown management and map awareness. You can win games on Soraka simply by giving your teammates the option to do riskier plays while you have R. Your R basically turns every situation into you are helping your team. It's like a global. It is a global. So if you have a winning side lane, you can be useful from anywhere on the map on Soraka. But what this means you need to do is you need to tell your team, I have Soraka R, you can play aggressive. And it kind of gets you involved in the play a little bit more. But then on top of that, Soraka really requires you to have a certain level of cooldown management and cooldown awareness, because a lot of the time you can get much more value from Soraka by just waiting out cooldowns and saving your silence or your heals for the right moments, and baiting out enemy cooldowns is very important on enchanters in general, and Soraka teaches you a lot about that. So Lulu, Karma, Soraka for enchanters. And then lastly, mages. Now I only have 2 mages that I would really recommend, because frankly, like, you can play whatever mage you want if you're really into it, but in terms of mages, I put Lux and I put Brand. Now there's other mages you can play like Vel'Koz and stuff like that, but I think they're a little bit more unique or complicated, difficult to learn. So I would recommend Lux simply because it teaches you a lot about skill shot accuracy. You got to practice this champ to hit your skill shots. A lot of Lux is knowing, the kind of angles you can throw your Q at, or how you can make sure your Q lands. Basically positioning yourself, like maybe forcing the enemy to walk into a side of the lane, which is easier to land your Q in. But then also Lux like teaches you a little bit about cooldown management. And this is the same for a lot of long range mage champs, but she has huge cooldowns. So you really need to be on the ball when it comes to knowing when you can throw Q and when you can't throw Q. Your Q is basically your strongest offensive tool, but also your strongest defensive tool. So you cannot just walk up and throw Q. If you miss it, and the enemy can all in you. So it teaches you a bit about that, a bit about cooldown management, but then also you can 1 versus 2 lanes on Lux if you're strong and if you know what you're doing, because this champion has a ridiculous amount of damage and a lot of pick potential. It also helps that on Lux you have the option to kind of play more enchanter style or go damage. You can go both builds on Lux. Like, there's not really one build that you have to go on her. So I think she's just a very versatile champ, and I would really recommend playing her. She's really, really fun. She does have massive cooldowns though, but in some ways, the champions that have massive cooldowns really do teach you to have some patience in lane, and your cooldowns matter so much more. So you can't just like spam your cooldowns off the top of your head and just hope that you win lane. You have to think about it a little more, and that teaches you a little bit about the game, I guess. I wrote Brand as the second one. Now, I personally think that this one is a bit debatable, but like I said, if you like certain mages, you can probably play them. Brand, for me, teaches you a lot about laning, positioning in lane, because he's very squishy, very immobile, so you do actually need to position quite carefully in lane. But he's a simple champion in some ways, but he's also got a lot of skill shots. So you really do have to start being aware of where you're standing on Brand. And you can't just, expect to face tank Nautilus Hook on Brand. Like, you'll probably die. But what he does give you is, even though you do get risky lanes, he gives you the opportunity to snowball through just pure damage, right? You can turn situations yourself with pure damage. So if you want more like really aggressive champion, like really aggressive in lane, you can go Brand. Just keep in mind his laning phase isn't like particularly great. There's a lot of champions that kind of dumpster him laning phase wise. So yeah, I'm not really sold on the Brand just yet, but I needed to put another mage down, and I would recommend some other mages if I could think about it. But Vel'Koz is like maybe he's a little tough. He's a little tough to play in my opinion. And then there's other mages like Xerath and things like that. But Xerath suffers from the same problem Brand does, where he's very immobile. So I mean, you can have a think about it. But mages, I would recommend there's a bunch you can think about whatever you want to play and play whatever you want. But anyway, yeah, that was the video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I know it was a really short one, but I just thought I'd make this. I'm going to link this video if people ask me, hey, what supports I should play on stream? So yeah, you can leave a like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And I stream on Twitch roughly at 8 p.m. every night. Some nights a little bit later, depending on my scrims. But yeah, if you want to tune in, ask me questions, hang out during my stream, link is in the description. Thank you very much. Good luck in solo queue. Peace.